Welcome back, y'all, to the discussion for this week's Torah portion, which is Yitro. Hopefully you've read the Torah portion or listened in to the reading that is the video before this one. But we have a discussion we're here again together, you and I. And this is a really interesting Torah portion because here we see for the very first time, we see a governmental structure actually being created for Israel. So in verse 18, chapter 18, verse, let's see which one we do here. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, says to him, "You're overwhelmed. You need to have other people help you." And so in verse, 21, let me go a little bit higher. Starting in verse 17, Moses' father-in-law said to him, "What you are doing is not good. You and the people will certainly wear yourself out, for this thing is too heavy for you. You're not able to do it alone. Now obey my voice, I will give advice, and God will be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring the cases to God, and shall warn them about the statutes and the laws, and make them know the way in which you must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for able men who are from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe. Place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, and let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they'll bring to you, but every small matter they shall decide for themselves." This is actually technically called kritarchy, which is a rule of judges.
Okay.
So you have a law. The people in power, the people that are in the government, basically, are judges. So this is a kritarchy. The interesting thing is, it goes all the way, one of the many interesting things, it goes all the way down to 10.
Yes.
And that seems an awfully small number for a governmental unit,
Well, it is, this is the foundation for the tradition of a minyan, which literally is 10 people. Okay.
It's not the small and yellow guys, right?
Sorry,
I could not help.
I've spelled it incorrectly and been corrected before. But in tradition, it says that 10 is the smallest number that you can have for a godly authority. And in many Jewish congregations, they will not do liturgy unless there are 10 people present. Now, depending upon your congregation, depends upon what the criteria is for being numbered. In sparse rural congregations, it gets right down to 10 people that are breathing. Typically, it is at least 10 males that have performed their bar mitzvah. In some congregations, it includes the females as well. In some congregations, it's heads of household.
Yeah.
But it is fluid depending on what's available. But the idea is that it takes 10 to come together and do God's business, if you will. And this is the foundation of it. This is also, we tend to translate this as 10 people get together and choose a leader. But I find it interesting that these instructions were given to Moses, and he was to choose from among them, verse 21, choose from among all the people competent men, God-fearing, honest, incorruptible. Moses was supposed to choose them, not the people. The idea here is the foundation of our government here in the United States, what it was intended to be. It's a republic. You don't choose 10 people don't get together and choose the one person that's popular. The one person is chosen because they fit the criteria. and they're chosen to make the right decision, not the popular decision. Because, as you said, this is a system of judges.
Yeah.
And it goes up the line. If, I say this all the time in my business when people bring me things to work on. I said, I'm not bashful. If I get in over my head and I don't know how to fix it, I'll tell you. Doesn't cost you anything for me to say, oh, sorry, I can't fix that. Doesn't happen very often, but it does every now and then. These people that were chosen needed to be men that would say, I don't know what to do in that situation. I need to pass this one up the line.
Yeah.
What a pleasant thought that is, considering the present state of things that we have. Everybody knows that they have the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. And everybody's required to have an opinion about everything.
Yeah.
You notice that? Like, they have some politician on a show or something like that, and it's like they keep asking different things and whatnot. It's like, I'm sitting there going, it's okay to say that you don't know.
I haven't researched this. I can't give you an intelligent answer.
Exactly.
That would be such a blessing to hear
says
every
that.
now and then.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody says that. Ever. Ever.
Well, why is this here? I mean, for those of you that have already took a look at the Torah portion, it goes on here and we have the 10 words, the 10 commandments. Why does this portion start with Jethro saying, hey, dude, what you're doing is not good. You're going to wear yourself out. You got to get this system put in place so people can resolve their disputes. Is there a reason that these are put together?
I would think that they very much work hand in hand. And actually, I think Jethro did say to do that. He says, verse 20, and you shall warn them about the statutes and laws and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Mm-hmm. So he says, pick people and train them.
Yes.
So here we got picking people. And then in chapter 20 here in this portion, we got basic training.
Yes.
So
the foundational training.
The foundational training, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I find it interesting after he says what to do here in verse 22. Normally, they will settle the people's disputes. They should bring you the difficult cases, but ordinary matters they should decide themselves. In this way, they will make it easier for you and share the load with you. If you do this, and God is directing you to do it, you will be able to endure, and all these people, too, will arrive at their destination peacefully. How many times in a congregational setting and or a community setting do we end up in a situation where we've got no way to resolve disputes?
Yeah.
We got nobody to say, okay, not everybody's going to be happy with this decision, but this is the decision. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to move forward. What a blessing that would be if we had that. We don't have that because we've abandoned this. These leaders were accountable to the people that they represented. They were accountable to the leaders over them. They weren't, what's the word I'm looking for? This wasn't a totalitarian form of government. It was a republic in its purest form. It was, we judge by God's standards, and if we're not sure what God's standard is in this case, we pass it until somebody is sure.
Yeah. How do we, I mean, if we wanted to do something like this, though, how do we pick? Because this is Moses choosing, so that's exceptional. Moses had a direct line to God. It's not. It wouldn't be surprising that he would pick, and he would pick the right people. But what do we do?
This almost seems cliche, but it's a job that if somebody wants it, they're probably not qualified.
That's a well-worn cliche, but it's there for a reason.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can pick out the person that you know has wisdom and a desire for justice among your community. That's something that, as you work together one-on-one, that becomes obvious. And in some communities, there may be multiple people that would be qualified. And in that case, I'm not sure.
Well, actually, that might come up, but you got leaders of 10 all the way down to tens and 50s and hundreds and thousands. There's actually quite a few leaders walking around, especially if it's 10 people and not
Yes.
10 families.
Right.
Like that seems an overabundance of folks. But maybe that's exactly what's necessary, in order to keep small conflicts small and not have them escalate over time.
You ever have a dispute in your household that needs godly judgment?
Yeah.
You perform that task in your household. And you ever have a dispute with your neighbor that's not worth going to law enforcement over, but you really wish that you could come to a reasonable agreement?
I've actually been very fortunate with neighbors.
Okay.
I have not had that need.
Well, many times I've actually in recent years been very fortunate with neighbors, but sometimes there are disputes
Yeah.
but I find it interesting here that we get the idea of setting up this government, and Moses is going to teach them the laws and the teachings, and we don't have the 10 words yet.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Moses has a relationship with God and speaks to him face to face, but Israel doesn't have the 10 words yet. And I'm not sure today how we would mimic this. I do know that in most Protestant organizations, they have a system similar to this where in your there will be a division. I was part of I can't remember the name of it, but there was a Southern Baptist division, and if there were disputes that couldn't be settled within a congregation, you would bring your, for lack of a better term, your district rep in to help negotiate this. And if it couldn't happen, then you kind of went uphill. Or if the congregation had a problem with their pastor, they would go to the district people, and if that couldn't be answered, it's a form of accountability that I've seen in that case.
Yeah, it's also an I don't know what the right word is, but outlet. That's not the right word, but it's like if you do have a problem, there is a path that you can take,
right?
Including a path that doesn't involve the people you have a problem with. Because you might have a problem with the elders in your church or something like that. Well, okay, at that point, go around them and go to the district level. Which in this case would be like leader of 50 or 100 or something like that.
Right. And then you find out Is the problem yours or is the problem the leaders? You get somebody else looking at the situation and going, okay, I see what's going on here, and they can speak godly wisdom into it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the thing, and I'm reminded of a Paul Harvey quote. But this is how this mimics our government. Because this is a form of self-government.
Yeah.
Now, let's say you've got a problem with your leader and you go around them to the next person in line, and they come in and they look at the situation and they go, oh, I see what's going on here. You don't like him because of the decision that he made you uncomfortable. And the problem is that you're actually the problem, not your leader. And sometimes we need to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Many times I have been in a situation where I'll ask somebody, from my point of view, this is a problem. I'm not sure if this is a problem or if I'm the problem. I need somebody to point this out. But Paul Harvey's quote is, self-government only works with self-discipline.
Yeah.
And we have to be a disciplined people enough that we're willing to submit to God's will to be able for God's government to work. If we don't have that self-discipline, then this government doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, there needs to be a desire from within yourself for justice and for righteousness, let's say, for living correctly or whatnot. And they were aware of this at the founding of our country because they were, the famous quote from Franklin, somebody asked him what kind of government we were going to get. He says, it's a republic if you can keep it.
Yeah.
And there was other writings as well where, they understood that. Adams, I think, wrote about this fairly extensively in one of the Federalist Papers, that this form of government that we have would only work with a moral people.
Yes.
Because it lacks if you have an immoral people, you need more outside laws to keep them under control. Mm-hmm. If you have a moral people, you don't have to have as many laws and enforcement mechanisms.
Right.
Because they're already naturally, for the most part, not going to do this and that. Or for the most part, are not going to be extremely underhanded and lying and those kinds of things. And it's an important component because you have to have kind of a completely different form and intensity of government between a moral people and an immoral people.
Reminds me of the statement I heard that a people will get the leader they deserve.
Yeah.
And you can read into that what you want.
So there's another one, I'm sorry, but it's like democracy is a system where the people get what they want, good and hard.
Right. Okay.
All right.
So we have Jethro setting up this form of judges or judgment that takes a load off of Moses.
Yeah.
And teaches him how to delegate authority, which was desperately needed. The thousands upon thousands of people that were there, and he was the only judge. I just cannot imagine what was happening.
Yeah.
And I mean, you think we have a backlog in the courts today. And then we move forward, and one of the most intriguing points in the scripture is in chapter 19.
Okay.
That I think gives each of us as Israel a huge responsibility. In verse 5, now if you will pay careful attention to what I say and keep my covenant, then you will be my own treasure from among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you will be a kingdom of Kohanim for me, a nation set apart.
Kingdom of priests and a
A
holy nation.
kingdom of priests and a holy nation.
Yeah.
That is a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
How do we interpret that? And it was many, many years ago. I was content to go to church when it was convenient and warm the pew and wait for the dismissal and rush out the door. And I had no idea yet of anything from a Hebraic perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But in the vernacular that I was familiar with at that time, it seemed that there was a call on my life. Well, as I started studying the Scripture, I realized that there's a call on every one of us' lives. That's a huge responsibility to be a kingdom of priests and part of a holy nation.
Yeah.
Now,
What does that even mean? Like, what is the implications for us? Or never mind us. What's the implications for them to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation?
okay. Well, it's easy to picture Aaron,
Mm-hmm.
high priest. He served in the tabernacle, at the altar. He handled the sacrifices. He handled everything. So we're all supposed to do what Aaron did? No.
Yeah.
He was the high priest. There were some things that Aaron did that if we tried to do, we would be destroyed. We can't come near the holy things unless you're properly prepared. Well, the Levites, they were all priests. So we're all supposed to be Levites. No, Levites were set apart for a reason. Who was Aaron a priest to?
He was a priest to the nation of Israel.
Mm-hmm. And who did he deal with on a regular basis, though? Who did he have?
Moses?
Moses / the Levites. The Levites were the ones that served in the tabernacle.
Yeah.
So who were the Levites priests to?
Everybody else?
The people of the nation of Israel.
Yeah.
So who is Israel supposed to be a priest to? They're a kingdom of priests
Yeah. So the rest of the world.
to the rest of the world. A good friend of mine that's passed on, Kefa, Peter Mancuso, very special man. I knew him for years. I met him on the internet. Very simple man. Very passionate man. Met him on the internet. Met him in person in Virginia, in person again in Canada. Found out that he was sitting in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and wanted to be part of a Sukkot celebration. And at that time, I was in Colorado trying to get some friends ready so that they could go to Sukkot in Oklahoma. And I was working there for 2 weeks to get their business caught up so they could be there. And Peter was down in Chattanooga and needed a trip to Sukkot. So I left Colorado, drove to Chattanooga, brought Peter to Oklahoma Sukkot. It was a busy Sukkot before it started. But he said this well. Preach the gospel into all the world. Use words when necessary. Israel is supposed to be a priest to the world, but not with their words, with their actions. We're supposed to set up a government of accountability where these leaders, these judges, if you will, know God's commands, know his rulings, and judge accordingly. We're supposed to teach these things to the whole world. Because, yes, Israel is a special, set-apart people, but it's God's desire that all would come to serve him. They're showing me the timing there, and we're going to... We still have the 10 words to go through.
Yeah, it's starting to get a little tight. Well, what shall we say about the 10 Commandments? Step 1, do them.
Serve the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, body, and soul.
Yeah.
And love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
On these words hang all the commandments. The 10 words are a breakdown of that, of how you serve the Lord your God and how you love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
And they're worth mentioning. I really expected to get here today, but I'm glad that we got a chance to talk about, you know, if you have these 10 words, but you don't have that government in place, so when you're trying to figure out how to apply this in your life, how do you resolve issues without that structure of judges?
Yeah.
And as corrupt as our society has become, we can't go to the secular courts and get righteous judgment. And I know that sounds like a very pessimistic statement.
Yeah.
I have heard of it occasionally, but it is not the norm of things I've heard and the things I've experienced. We got to get it right. God gave us a set of instructions so we could learn to live like that holy people.
Yeah.
These instructions were given to Israel at this point because they'd been living in bondage as Egyptians, and now they needed to learn to live like God's holy, redeemed people. If we want to live like his holy, redeemed people, we got to follow these words, and that includes setting up the structure of judges.
Yeah. Well, and how we do that is
That
a
is
much more
debatable.
in-depth talk.
Much more in depth, because we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but we also don't have Moses anymore.
Right.
And I don't have a good answer for how.
Yeah.
Not yet.
No. But we'll work on it. And if we figure it out, we will let you know. We'll have an extra video. Be on the lookout. And if not, there's always next week's Torah portion and next week's discussion. See you guys then.
Baruch Hashem.